Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Audrey, and I'm a regional program manager with the ALS Association Florida chapter. Before I introduce our speaker for today, I do want to go over a few housekeeping items. On today's webinar, everyone has been muted upon entry. If you do have a question, I ask that you raise your virtual hand, and I'll be monitoring that function, and we can unmute as necessary, but we will like to save all the questions for the end. So if something comes to mind, please use the chat feature. And during the question and answer section, I will address those questions as they come up. Today, I would like to introduce our guest speaker. This is Stephen Lerner. He graduated from the University of Central Florida in May of 2013 with a bachelor's degree in public administration and a minor in emergency management. Stephen has worked several notable incidences in Central Florida. Stephen served as a planning section chief for the Orlando Pulse nightclub attack, Hurricane Matthew, and Hurricane Irma. Stephen was also deployed to the state EOC to support communities in the recovery from Hurricane Michael. Most recently, Stephen served as the planning section chief for the COVID-19 response in Seminole County, Florida. Stephen was a graduate of the National Emergency Management Executive Academy, an advanced academy where he joined other leaders in emergency management field from across the nation to discuss high-level policy issues and developed evidence-based solutions to increase the effectiveness of response to national level incidences. Today, he's going to be talking to us about hurricane preparation. So I would like to turn it over to Stephen. He does have a PowerPoint presentation for us.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me and see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Stephen Lerner. I work in Seminole County, Florida, which is just north of Orlando. I've been with the county for about 10 years. And one of the things that I'm truly passionate about is advocating for disability integration into all of our hurricane response and recovery plans, and then just disaster preparedness as a whole. I'm going to talk about hurricane preparation. And Judy, I heard your comments earlier. This is not meant to give you anxiety at all, but I am going to start as how we're going to flow through the presentation. I figured I'd do a 2022 hurricane season outlook for what we should expect this year. I'll talk about some personal preparedness activities that you as caregivers or individuals with ALS should think about. And then we'll talk about the intricacies between special needs and medically enhanced shelters and some of the burning questions that you have and some of the troubles that you may have experienced locally in your communities with that, and then what to do next. So what next steps should you take as we enter hurricane season? Before I do start, I know the last 2 years have been trying specifically on caregivers in the medical field and any medical professionals that are on the webinar. I just want to give my thanks to you for your perseverance through COVID-19 and all the challenges that have come with that. We are seeing cascading impacts because of COVID-19, and it will trickle into how hurricane season is prepared for by all of the residents in Florida. And I just want to thank you for the work that you do every day to care for those individuals, or if you are not a caregiver and you're an advocate for somebody, thank you for that as well. So we'll start off with the hurricane season outlook. So hurricane season begins June 1 and ends November 30th every year. And the experts, predict an above average season. So what does that mean? In emergency management and meteorologists look very closely at several forecasts and some averages throughout some of the metrics that we use. One of those is from Colorado State University. Ironically, they're never impacted by hurricanes there, but they are one of the major hurricane scientific prediction centers in the country. And they produce a hurricane forecast each year. And then subsequently, as of actually a few days ago, NOAA puts out their own forecast as well. So looking at these numbers, these are all great numbers. However, in emergency management, and what I advise everybody to do is to not focus on the numbers and really look at the next storm. We prepare in emergency management for just that one storm, whether it be a tropical system that doesn't get named or a large scale hurricane. It doesn't really matter the size or scope. We prepare for them the same way, and we want you to do that as well. So these are some hurricane season names. These are this set of names. I know COVID took up a lot of the media attention last year, but last year was quite a busy hurricane season. We did run out of names, and they ran through the Greek alphabet. And after that, they decided we will no longer use the Greek alphabet. So there's another slate of names behind this one that can get used if needed. Hopefully we don't get down to that list. But these are the hurricane names that you'll see this year. The National Hurricane Center is looking for I names. So if you have any I name suggestions, send them to the National Hurricane Center. They are always looking for additional I names, evidently. So that's what the National Hurricane Center director reported to us this year. Just sort of an interesting fact. Some things about hurricane season that I want you to keep in mind. We often, when speaking to the public and other members of the community, we always hear, well, Hurricane Irma came to me at just a tropical storm, or I lived through Charlie, Francis, and Jean, and it was just a Category 1. There will never be a Hurricane Justa, and I really want people to remove that from their vernacular. Seeing that there is that there can be large catastrophic damage from any size storm, whether it be a tropical storm or a large Category 5 hurricane like we saw with Michael in the Panhandle. The tropical storm Faye in 2008 over Central Florida was one of the worst flooding events that occurred after Tropical Storm Faye. So it really doesn't take much to cause significant damage in our community. Those of you that were impacted by Hurricane Irma, depending on where you lived in the state, in Central Florida, in the Orlando area, Hurricane Irma, when it got to our area of the state, we didn't see anything more than tropical storm force winds as it weakened, moving far into the state. So a lot of people feel in Central Florida that they survived Hurricane Irma, when in fact they actually survived Tropical Storm Irma. And it's just something to think about. And we like to look at a lot of the debris numbers afterwards. We unfortunately had to, when we collected all of our debris, there was 11 million tons of debris that were just generated in Seminole County. So what does that look like? If you've ever been to Epcot at Disney, that's 11 Epcot balls worth of debris just in Seminole County from a tropical storm type event. So keep in mind, regardless of the size, we could expect a lot of damage. Don't judge a hurricane by the last hurricane. So we often hear, oh, well, last one was great. It's gonna do exactly the same thing. Not necessarily true, not really what we see historically. Those individuals that were impacted lost their homes in Hurricane Harvey in Texas, and those with Hurricane Michael in the Panhandle. We heard much of that they've never seen impacts like this before. And it's just, just for a planning mindset, please do not think of the last hurricane that you went through and judge it by the one that might be coming. This is an interesting fact. There have been more Category 4 hurricanes that made landfall from 2017 to 2021 than from 1963 to 2016. So what does that tell you? That tells you that storms are becoming more frequent and stronger. So we need to really pay close attention as storms start to ramp up. Ironically, most fatalities are not from wind and storm surge. It's from people who start to do cleanup and take recovery activities after a storm. So when the storm immediately passes through, a lot of times people want to hurry up and clean up their lawn and their debris, and cut off those leaners and hangers that are on the trees. And what we see often is the fatalities and injuries that occur from people that are trying to do cleanup and repair, and they figure that after the storm is a good time to train themselves on how to use a chainsaw, and they hurt themselves, or they think it's a good time to climb up on the ladder and they hurt themselves. So most of our fatalities that we see from hurricanes are actually from after the event. So please be very careful after a storm when doing cleanup or things like that around your home. Another interesting fact is little wobbles matter. So the National Hurricane Center does a pretty good job about coming up with the storm predictions, and they often put a cone up during the storm of where the center of the storm could travel in that period of time. And they'll usually draw a little line in the middle, and that's the line of best fit based on all of the models that they run. And what often happens is the storm doesn't exactly follow those tracks. So in Hurricane Matthew, as it approached the coast of Florida, actually jogged about 40 miles to the east, which was worked out in Florida's benefit. Irma, unfortunately, jogged about 40 miles to the west, making some of the strongest impacts of a hurricane, which is the upper right quadrant of the storm, pass over much of the land over Florida. So while that line's important, please don't focus directly on that line. It is a line of best fit from all of the models, and those little wobbles that the storm makes will matter. What we also see is rapid intensification recently. So most storms that are Category 3 and higher were not at Category 3 levels 48 hours before they were. So what we find is that rapid intensification really happens in the last few hours prior to landfall. So paying very close attention to the modeling and the direction that we're seeing, and paying very close attention to the information that the meteorologists are sharing, because something that might look like a tropical storm that's pretty close to the state could rapidly intensify very quickly into something much larger. So just keep some of these important facts in mind for this season, and we'll go into personal preparedness. So I'm going to break this down into a few categories. So we're going to talk about planning. So individuals with medical and access needs have much different planning considerations that need to be made for individuals that either don't care for or don't have those loved ones that have medical and access needs. What I want those individuals and caregivers to think about and ask themselves first is, what can you not live without on a daily basis? Once you start making up that list of what you cannot live without on a daily basis, you'll start to identify some of those key things that you may be without in the aftermath of a hurricane. Things like power, water, access in and out of your home due to debris. You name it. There's all kinds of things that can happen if you choose to stay home. If you, in fact, feel that those things are just so important that you can't live without them, you need to consider evacuating. And can you evacuate safely? Do you have the means and capability to evacuate safely? When you consider evacuation, I really want you to think about some of that essential medical equipment that you have for your loved ones, medications, and some of that special food supplies. If you do decide to shelter at home, I want you to think about and consider, is your home truly safe for the next storm? What we've found is that homes that are built after 2010, generally the building code in those communities was brought up to a standard that made them a lot safer than those that were built pre-2010. And you might need to do some additional mitigation on your home, or check out the foundation, and check out for if you have wind mitigation straps on your roof, and just do that insurance check on your property to make sure that your home is safe for the next storm. Do you have someone who can check on you if you live alone? So if you choose to shelter at home, there are oftentimes individuals that do live alone with some severe medical and access needs. And it's so important to have someone, whether it be a neighbor or a family member or somebody, a caregiver, who can check on you if you do live alone and you choose to shelter at home. Does your home have a generator? If you do have a generator and it hasn't been tested in a while, it's time to call up your friendly generator tech or electrician, or get a loved one or family member or friend who really knows how to operate a generator and test it to make sure it's working. Now's the time to do that, instead of 48 hours before the storm and everybody's strapped for resources and trying to go to Home Depot and Lowe's and other hardware stores to purchase supplies to get their generator to work. And then stock your kit with supplies you may need, which brings me to the next slide of get a kit. So personal preparedness, we're looking at making a plan, now looking at getting a kit. So potential emergency kit items. Individuals with medical and access needs generally do not utilize the food that's typically shelf stable. There's special food and dietary restrictions that individuals are on that needs to be considered. So please pay close attention to the special food that a loved one might need. Additionally, medication. So when the state moves under a state of emergency, there is a state law that allows pharmacies to dispense an extra 10-day supply of medication. So take the opportunity to get that extra 10-day supply when the state is under a state of emergency at your pharmacy, because you don't know when the next time you might be able to get medication, especially if it's that time of the month where you're low and right before a refill. So a lot of times they'll either expedite the refill or they'll give you that extra 10-day supply under the state of emergency. So keep that in mind. Your general emergency supply kit things that we see are batteries, chargers, potable water, water to operate medical equipment. We know there's quite a bit of medical equipment out there that needs special types of water, and there is a run on that equipment and those supplies immediately before a hurricane. Wipes, sleeping items, important medical documents, important contacts with durable medical companies is so important as well. If you have a wheelchair or you have a special type of medical device that is serviced by a durable medical equipment company, have that checked out. If you're on oxygen and you're on electric oxygen concentrator, oftentimes the durable medical equipment company will bring you tanks as extra supply. So you do not have to plug in the concentrator in case your power goes out, and they'll bring you some extra tanks so you don't run out of oxygen. Additionally, those individuals who are on power wheelchairs should consider a standard or manual wheelchair as a backup. This is incredibly important if you do have to evacuate at a moment's notice. I'm not saying that you can't bring your power wheelchair, it's just there are times where you might be using it and the power goes out and you're unable to charge it for some reason. And we do need to switch over to a standard manual wheelchair in the time being until we could get the battery charged again. These are just some high level items. Really take a moment to think about what you need, especially for the medical care of your individual that you might be caring for, and include those items in there. Now, am I saying you need to go out right now and purchase all of these items? No. To your benefit, over the next 10 days, starting this weekend, there is a tax-free on a 10-day tax-free period on hurricane supplies. So take advantage of that. But some of the things that we promote in our office is most people today don't have the money to go out and purchase an entire kit right before hurricane season. What we ask people to do is each time they go to the grocery store or each time they go to one of your medical supply companies or pharmacies, get 1 or 2 extra items leading up into hurricane season. I know it's coming up next weekend, but take a few moments and split this out into a few trips, and then at the end of the time right before hurricane season starts, we typically start this in January, and then right before hurricane season starts, we have a really nice, well-stocked kit. And then when hurricane season ends, what I like to do is actually donate some of those items to the food pantries that haven't been used for the holiday drives for food or some of those things, and then we start all over again in January. So consider getting into that pattern and thinking about how you can break this up so this doesn't cost a lot of money, so that you can actually phase this in. The next item is staying informed. So we had make a plan, get a kit, and now staying informed. Each county in the state of Florida has an emergency alerting system. So please find out what that alerting system is for you in your community so that you can stay up to date on what your county is doing during a hurricane. If you happen to live in Seminole County, our alert system is called Alert Seminole. You can go to prepareseminole.org and sign up for our system. You can also call your local emergency management office in your community, and they will sign you up manually if for some reason you don't have access to a computer or you don't know how to do that online. They can sign you up through their local alerting system over the phone. Most of the counties in Florida utilize the same system. So if you were coming from another county, chances are they have your information and they could transfer that over. But if not, and you've never signed up before, it's very important to sign up for that. The next thing is to make your vulnerability known to your local first responders. And how you do that is registering for your local special needs registry. I put this link up of snr.flhealthresponse.com. This is the consortium of all of the links for all 67 counties special needs registries. Basically, you pick on the drop down the county that you're in, and it will either direct you to the special needs registry in your community or bring you to their page where you can start registering. All 67 counties in Florida use a different type of method to do this. And it's based on the capability of our local health department, which I'll go into in the next few slides. But the special needs registry is sanctioned by statute and allows us simply to identify that you are a vulnerable individual in our community that either we need to check on before and after a storm, or we need to plan for that you may come to one of our shelters. Another way to stay informed is to have a weather radio. Weather radios have been known to wake people up out of their sleep during tornado activity and have saved quite a few lives. So a lot of people need that audible noise to wake them up. I know I do. I fall into pretty deep sleep during the evening, and most tornadoes happen between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. So in Florida, we typically don't have very strong tornadoes, but we do get some, and they do cause quite a bit of damage. And having that weather radio is essential to that preparedness. Always a standard AM/FM radio, very, very important. And then those of you that are on social media, consider following your local jurisdiction because they put out information usually straight from their county emergency operations center. There's somebody there that's putting that information out on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, whatever you're on. If you are on anything, and they typically will share that essential information on those social media platforms as well. So sheltering, I'm going to talk a little bit about sheltering, and then we'll get into some of the nuances of medical access sheltering. So I want everybody on the call to think of sheltering as a place of last resort. The resources that are provided at our shelters are very similar to those resources that are provided in a lifeboat on a cruise ship. Those of you who have taken a cruise before, a lifeboat is not a great place that you want to be, and the shelter is simply that. It is a lifeboat for you in case you need it. It is a place of last resort. What should you expect at a shelter? You should expect a space on the floor and 3 meals, and that's about it. And that's the bare bones that you will receive typically across the state. Some counties provide cots. Generally, they're not medical capability cots. Some of the counties have procured those. Some of them have not. So please make sure to bring supplies with you that you would need if in fact you do choose to go to a shelter. Having a caregiver present is sometimes a requirement for a lot of the county shelters, the special needs shelters, and having somebody that understands medical conditions that you may need or a loved one might need assistance with is very important. Determine if your medical capability exceeds what your special needs shelter can provide. So I can't tell you how many times I hear from residents across the state of Florida that they submitted a special needs registration and they were told by their local jurisdiction that your care exceeds what we can provide at a special needs shelter. And I'm going to explain why you may have received that answer. That answer is because of the 67 counties in Florida, there is varying capability across the state of the local health departments, which typically operate the special needs shelters. That capability may be either due to the complexity of staff that may be available. Some departments of health have been scaled down to only have 2 or 3 nurses in some cases. In Seminole County, we only have 6 actual RNs on staff that can provide those. So we are having to find additional medical staff through contracted means to make sure that our special needs shelters can meet those capabilities. In some cases, they may not have the medical equipment. So if your loved one or yourself requires a Hoyer lift to get in and out of bed, there are some counties that have the capability to provide that, and there's many that don't, simply because they don't have the equipment or the training to operate the equipment. So this varying level of capability makes it very difficult for individuals who have medical needs to successfully shelter in a special needs shelter. So please get with your local community, your local county that you live in, and determine what their levels of capability are, and if you fit within that capability level, or you may need to make another plan. So what happens if they don't take me? And here's some things to think about. We've often heard that local residents who may exceed the care that can be provided at a special needs shelter reach out to hospitals or high acuity care centers to make arrangements with them. And as of recently, what we've heard is some of those agreements that have been made have been falling through. And those individuals are left at the 11th hour of a storm coming and nowhere to go. Be proactive about this process for your care, for the loved one that you're caring for, or you yourself, if this is you, and contact your local emergency management office to discuss what those options are. If you register for the special needs program in that community and you are denied, please follow up with a question of, so what resources are available to me? There are quite a few resources available. Some counties have contingency plans for those individuals that fall through those cracks. And many of them have partnerships with different community organizations, centers for independent living, or long-term care facilities for temporary stays that help with sheltering those high complex medical needs in the community. If that doesn't work, please go back and reconsider evacuation if it's possible. Don't wait for the last minute for your plans to fall apart. Take a moment to connect with your medical provider, with your physician, with any individuals that come to your home, maybe to service equipment, and talk with them about some options that might be available to you for sheltering. The best advice I can give an individual with a medical or access need who is afraid of being without certain resources is to get out of the storm's path at all possible. I understand it's costly in cases to evacuate. I understand that it's very difficult to move a lot of the clients that you might care for and a lot of the caregivers that you might care for. But the most comfortable thing that you can do for an individual with medical and access needs is keep them comfortable. And a lot of that time is to make sure that they have the resources that they need before and after a storm. And unfortunately, in some cases, the only way to provide that is to evacuate. So I know that that was quick. And a lot of times when I go and do presentations for different groups, we continue the presentation through questions and answers because some of you have very specific questions related to your conditions or the people you care for, or you just have some burning questions about the way things work during a hurricane and what we do in emergency management to stabilize the community. So I am going to open up the floor for people who want to ask questions. Audrey, I don't know if you want to facilitate this process through chat or through just open up, but happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Yeah, I just allowed people to unmute themselves. So if you guys have questions, we can go ahead and start that process. Judy, I just saw that you unmuted. Do you have a question you want to start off with?
I do. I was given the Florida emergency evacuation, whatever it is, that you're supposed to register. I was given the link. It takes me round and round and round and round. And it says that you're connected. And then I go and hit this and this will happen. And it says access denied. I've called the number that's on there 2 to 3 times. I've sent emails. I've called the health department.
What county are you in?
Collier.
Okay. Audrey, do you have Judy's contact information that you can forward me? Judy, I will personally call Collier and have him reach out to you and connect you with somebody over there that can give you a live person that will help you through this process. There is a counterpart there that I am very familiar with that I know never wants to hear that from one of their residents. So I apologize if that happened to you on behalf of them. And I will definitely connect you with a EM professional from Collier County that can help fix that problem for you.
Thank you. That's an answer to prayer.
Excellent. Other questions?
If you're more comfortable using the chat, you can go ahead and type in and I can ask the question on your behalf. It's whatever everyone's most comfortable with.
I will ask the same question. If I take care of my brother, if we live in Jupiter, Florida, would be the website that I should address for him as a person that need help?
Let me find that out for you.
Thank you.
So that would be in Palm Beach County. So I will give you Palm Beach County's contact information for their emergency management office,
Okay.
and they can direct you to how to register or whatever other answers you may need.
Mhm.
So give me one moment. I also have some good friends over there too. All right, so their phone number is 561
Mhm.
712 6400.
And that's definitely a good idea to have my brother register for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, there was a question that came through the chat. What is the Lincoln contact number for Broward County?
In the chat. I'll put that in the chat for you so you have it.
All right. Are there any other questions?
We lost Audrey. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Oh no, she's there. I see her. I have no audio though.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can now. Very good. Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
Do you have a handout, like a checklist of everything that should be in a kit?
Yes, I have a handout and we also have it on our website. And I will send you that after the presentation so you could share it with other people.
Amazing.
Would that be something that you will be sending to our emails, Audrey?
Yes, I can send that out to everybody on this.
Thank you.
Stephen, I have a question. I know when people are in shelters, they ask the community for bottled water and things like that every once in a while. But before an emergency, do shelters ever need any type of durable medical equipment donated to them?
It's a really good question. So what I would consider that you do is actually pre-donate those items to your local health department. The local health department typically will take those items for their shelter equipment cache. The shelter equipment for the special needs shelters are typically housed at the local health department or emergency management office. Somebody has to bring that equipment to the shelter, which is why a lot of parents actually get very frustrated when we close schools before a storm and it's a bright sunny day out. So before the storm, it takes us a while to get these shelters staffed and equipped. So typically we close the shelters, we close schools a day before because they're used as shelters. And all that supplies is brought in so that when we call for an evacuation of a community, those shelters are ready to go. So getting that supplies donated ahead of time is very important. There's always a need for durable medical supplies. I would just ask that if you do end up donating it before the storm, that you check and make sure that they actually need it. A lot of times we, in emergency management, donations show up at shelters or other places, and they're not able to be processed or utilized effectively. So you want to make sure that those, especially durable medical equipment, goes to where the need is the greatest. So please reach out to somebody prior to donating that equipment and making sure that it'll go to the proper uses and not just be left there and nobody knows that it's there.
Okay, thank you. You said the health department, and what was the other place?
The local office of emergency management. Just ask them who has the shelter supplies for the special needs shelter, or who owns that stuff, and then that's what you want to contribute to.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question. I currently live in Chicago, but we're moving in 3 weeks. And we're about 7 miles away from the coast. It is a home built in 219, cinder block, metal roof. It was supposed to be well suited. What are the guidelines to follow in determining when to shelter in place and when to get out?
It's a good question. So I will say, unfortunately, fortunately for the line of work that I'm in, Seminole County is not a coastal community. So I actually play host to all those individuals who are evacuating from the coast inland, which is why our shelters have to meet a certain amount of capacity to hold everybody. But in terms of evacuation and when to stay, I really encourage you to understand what your evacuation zone is in your coastal community. And when they call for an evacuation for your zone, that is when you need to leave. Storm surge from the coast is becoming one of the biggest issues for coastal communities. Just the sheer amount of water that comes from a very strong storm is enough to really do a serious amount of damage. And if they call for an evacuation and you choose not to evacuate, it could be very detrimental to your safety. So I really encourage you to understand wherever it is that you're moving to. Each of those coastal communities have evacuation zones. Some use colors, some use numbers, some use letters. It really depends on the community. And when they do call for that evacuation, please listen to those first responders. We utilize a great deal of hurricane modeling and slosh models from the Weather Service to determine what that storm water inundation level is going to be in that community. And calling for those evacuation zones is very carefully determined prior to calling for that evacuation. So contrary to what people say, I know there's a lot of misnomers out there with evacuation zones and coastal communities. It is very methodically thought out and based on quite a bit of data that we get from the National Weather Service.
So fortunately, I'm in a storm zone 1.
Okay.
But when they call out for evacuation, they do it by zones?
Yeah, they typically do it by zones. And
Okay.
they do that so that they could limit the amount of traffic on evacuation areas. And they start with the closest to the water inward.
Very helpful. Thank you very much.
Sure.